like what we're thinking.
All right. So really, again, what is flourishing at that point? Because we don't even know who's defining it. Sam Harris obviously can take a stab at it, but that's just his opinion. There's nothing that objectifies his opinion so that he can say this, everyone else should follow this because of this reason. He can only say, I think this is good. You could also argue, well, what if the government said that? So let's say the United States said, we are going to say this morality is our morality and it's objective. Well, if you go outside the United States, it doesn't apply to you. So it's really subjective at that point. It's just the United States saying this is morally apprehensible or this is morally good. And so it changes depending on where you are. Whereas we would argue as Christians, we have our Bible, which gives us our morality base, and it's outside of us. It's based on a creator, and so that makes it objective for everyone. And it doesn't matter what culture or what time period you're in or what country you're in. It always can apply to you. Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit again about flourishing here. So how do we define flourishing?
Really quick, Danny, that question.
Sure.
Well, more like comment. I would say that some would maybe try to argue that like animals have other species that have shown some capacity to help each other. Like even like I'll say even ants, you'll pick up injured ants and try to get them to safety, that kind of thing. I would say usually, at least for animals, except very rare cases, they won't venture to help outside of their group, their immediate group. And a lot of people say that, even the buzzword tribalism is wrong. Right. So there'd be no point in trying to help society as a whole. Yeah. Especially with other groups, other cultures. For us, if that morality does exist, there's no reason for it.
Right, because like if you don't know somebody, there's no way they can benefit you, and so it's like why help them? Whereas if your neighbor is struggling or something, like in theory they could eventually help you at some point, so it could benefit you to help them. You're right, animals they do have certain capacities in that they can love, like they love their kids. To a certain extent, they want to protect them. They have an innate, built-in nature to protect their children, usually. I would argue that's not necessarily morality, protecting their kids. It's more of an instinct, and it does, to a certain extent, keep the line going, which would keep animals around for longer. But yeah, there's some instances where they can love, but they don't necessarily have any sort of written moral code. And there's nothing that they necessarily can hold each other to. So it's really just brute force when it comes to the animal kingdom, and that whoever can eat the other person or eat the other animal, they win, kind of thing, which is very, very rough. All right, so any other questions before I move on? Cool. Well, again, we'll talk about flourishing here. So if you think about it, a lot of people like to say, well, science can tell us everything, science can give us answers to everything. Well, science doesn't actually give us answers, it's scientists that do that. You see, science, it can give us stats, it can give us figures, it can tell, like, I can tell if a plant's growing. I can tell, I can measure it, if it's growing inch by inch. Can I tell if the plant's doing well? Well, kind of depends what you call well at that point. Same idea kind of goes for humans. I can tell you, a human's growing, a human's alive, but science can't tell you what's moral. Science can't define as stealing as being immoral or moral, because if you think about it, it's statistics based. It doesn't have morality built into it. And so whenever someone says science, just remember that science can't ever tell you your morality. There's nothing that science can do to tell you, like, if abortion is wrong or not. It can tell you if a baby is a baby, if it's a person, but it can't tell you, is it wrong to kill anyone? It can't tell, like, if euthanasia. It can't tell you if it's wrong to kill an older person because they're on life support or something. it can only tell you what it would take for that person to die. And so just remember that kind of in the back of your mind. Again, if someone says, science tells me this, well, science can never define morality. That is outside the scope of what it's able to do. It can present stats, it can present figures, but it can't tell you what morality is. That takes a person to make a decision off facts to do that.
You're basically saying that science is objective, and science can't determine morality.
Science can be objective, yes. A certain, like a yardstick, it's the same distance no matter where you go. It's always the same 36 inches. But really, it's not going to affect as far as morality goes. You can't use science to measure morality. There's no yardstick to that, if that makes sense.
So you said just morality can't be measured?
Right.
Yeah.
It's something outside the sciences, really. And so it has to be a being with some sense of morality to make that judgment there. So think about it this way, just to give you an example. If a child walked into your kitchen and said, "Can I kill it?" You have to ask what it is first, right? That'll determine if you can kill it. Say if it's a cockroach, like, yes, go ahead, do it. If it's a frog, maybe not. If it's their little brother, it's definitely no. So it really depends on the situation. But all those judgments are based on the value we place on that individual, correct? So that's how we base our morality. All right. So this, is anyone familiar with nihilism very much? Nihilism. Sorry, I have a hard time pronouncing that. I'll be honest, if I was not a Christian, I would most likely believe this. This makes the most logical sense to me outside of Christianity. That's why I'm thankful I'm a Christian, but we'll talk a little bit about this. I'll read here what John Paul Sartre wrote about nihilism. Everything is indeed permitted if God does not exist and man is in consequence forlorn, for he cannot find anything to depend upon either within or outside himself. Nor, on the other hand, if God does not exist, are we provided with any values or commands that could legitimize our behavior. Really, I mean, this comic does it pretty good justice there, but it's saying there is no point to life. There is no reason for us to live. It's just an accident that we're alive. There's no meaning outside of me. I can come up with some little purpose if I want, but really I have no overall purpose in life. There's no point for me to be around. I can do whatever I want and it has no overall bearing on the world at all. In the end, if you think about it, science tells us that eventually we're going to run out of usable energy and the world is just going to cease to exist. And so because at the end of time, everything is going to cease to exist, there is no future life, if you will, so no heaven, no hell, or anything like that. Nothing has meaning on this earth. And so whatever I do doesn't matter. It's very depressing, especially if you're going through a rough time. If you go through that, it's like a downward spiral. Actually, there's been a lot of correlation between this and suicide. A lot of people who committed suicide are going down this path or thought, you could say, and it can be pretty depressing to go down. So, again, it's kind of self-explanatory in that, but really nothing matters at that point. There's no ethical or moral values that have any point to them. If anyone who believes this, they simply obey objective morality, or they simply are pragmatic and observe rules or laws because they're just trying to get along with people, and not because they actually believe that they're true or there's any truth behind them. They're just trying to be pragmatic and say, okay, well, I'm here, so I might as well go along with everyone and not cause a fuss. So, again, it's very depressing. It's just there's nothing objective about life, and really there is no meaning for you. And there is no such thing as evil in this. So if you think about it, something like a rape, that's not necessarily evil because you don't necessarily have purpose behind you. And so the person doing it and the person who's on the receiving end on that one, they have no purpose. So if you have no purpose, there's nothing evil you can do. If you think about it like a rock doesn't have any purpose to it. So I can do whatever I want to a rock, doesn't matter. It's no biggie, nothing, there's no moral being to it. But as Christians, we argue, there's intrinsic value to a person. So that's why if rape happens, there is something horribly wrong. There's something evil about that. But with nihilism, again, there's no purpose behind anyone. So in that situation, that's not evil. I may not like that it happened, and I may even try and fight against that, but morally, it's not evil. Are there any questions about that? Okay. Going through pretty fast here.
I like the rock example.
So this one I just thought was kind of funny. It kind of explains moral relativism relatively well. I'm gonna go ahead and take a break here. We're about halfway through, so if you need to use the restroom, that'd be great. It'd be a good time to do it if you need a drink or if you just want to stretch your legs. That'd be good. I'm gonna get a drink real quick and then check on something.
Man, I took out the Calvin and Hobbes book and put it upstairs. Could have had it out for this slide.